maybe this task was a little bit more tricky, because I would expect you to have some sort of prior knowledge of this to be able to do this. However, if you are coaching, you should have some understanding of this from a coaching perspective. So if we take individual skills now, we need to be able to break them down into 3 or 4 phases. So hopefully some of you will come up will have come up with some of the phases. Some of you might have come up with all 4. If you have, well, that's excellent, well done. And if we think of the 4 phases, the first phase of any individual fundamental movement skill is what we call the preparation phase. That is then followed by what we call the execution phase, which is followed by the critical incident, which is followed then by the final phase, which is the recovery phase or the follow through. So any individual fundamental movement skill, any sport skill should have these 4 phases. So if you are hitting a golf ball off the tee, if you are doing a tennis serve, we can take those skills and we can break them down into their 4 consecutive parts, as we can do with an individual fundamental movement skill like throwing a ball. We can break it down into its 4 constituent parts. So that was the first part of the task. If we think of the second part, what I asked you to do is to try and explain and discuss why is it that we take a skill and we break it down into its 4 constituent parts. Now hopefully you've come up with, we need to do this as coaches and teachers, because if we can't break the skill down, we can't apply the coaching process. We can't observe, we can't analyze, we can't diagnose what someone is doing wrong, and we can't correct it. And this is what I get quite annoyed about with coaches and teachers that are basically teaching movement skills to young children in primary and secondary school, is they will allow a young child to progress and participate. They recognize they can't throw, catch, they can't run, they can't kick, they can't jump. However, they haven't got the ability to step in and diagnose what they are doing wrong and correct their mistakes. And using this format, by breaking a skill down, it allows us to try and pinpoint specifically what they are doing wrong. And this is what good coaches are doing at the top level. They can use this approach and they can look at, right, if you take the England cricket team, they will have a batting coach. So Graham Thorpe is the batting coach. So Graham Thorpe will look at all of the players now. So if you take someone like Alistair Cooke, Alistair Cooke last year was going through a really bad run of form. Now Alistair Cooke is a professional cricket player. He's the England captain, he's the opening batsman. We would all assume that he is an expert cricketer and that he doesn't need to be coached. However, he still needs to be coached. And it could have been something very simple in the preparation phase. So the bowler's coming in and it's how he's standing at the crease. It's what he's doing with his bat and his backlift before the bowler pitches the ball. So it could have been some minor detail in the preparation phase which impacts then on the subsequent following phases. If you take professional golf players, they all have coaches. And again, it's the same thing. It's the coach will be able to video, to observe, to analyze at what particular phase of a shot are they doing something wrong, and they can pinpoint it, they can correct it and diagnose it. So the preparation phase is the individual getting prepared to do a movement. The execution phase is an individual executing the movement or just prior to the movement. The critical incident phase is the point at which they do or perform the movement. So if they're jumping, it's the point at which they leave the floor. If they're catching a ball, it's the point at which they catch the ball. If they throw the ball, it's the point at which they release the ball. And then the recovery phase is obviously what happens after the movement has been performed. What do we do in terms of the follow-through phase? What do we do in terms of the recovery phase? So if you are analysing young children doing a movement skill, you should be able to see at least 3 phases of movement. What do they do in the preparation phase? what do they do execution phase, what do they do recovery phase. And if they get one part of, if you think of it as a puzzle or a chain of sort of links, if they get one part of the puzzle wrong, if they get one link within the chain wrong, it will have a significant impact on how they perform the skill. Okay, so for task 4, we're going to spend a little bit longer on this. We're going to spend 20 minutes. You might need a little bit more time than 20 minutes. Probably best you work in small groups for this, so groups of 3 or 4. Now, what I want you to start to appreciate now and start to think about is that when we take a movement skill, we want to be able to break it down into its constituent parts. So we're going to break it down into preparation, execution, and recovery. So what I'm going to expect you or ask you to do for this task is I'm going to give you 4 fundamental movement skills. So I'm going to give you overhand throw, so throwing the ball overhand. I'm going to give you a horizontal jump, which is obviously jumping for distance. I'm going to give you roll, underhand, rolling the ball, and then I'm going to give you striking with a racket or a bat. If you haven't got a racket or a bat, then obviously you can improvise and use your hand. So to do these tasks, it's really important that you get up and have a go. So like I said at the start of the lecture, it's for those of you that are kinesthetic learners, you learn by doing. This isn't something you can just sit down and write about. You have to actively get up, you have to experience it, and you have to experiment and try it. Okay, so what we're going to do, we're going to spend 20 minutes on this. So for these 4 fundamental movement skills, what I want you to do is in your groups, can you identify, so if we take the overhand throw to begin with, can you identify what a young child would need to be able to do in the preparation phase? What would they need to be able to do in the execution phase? And what would they be able to do, or what would you expect them to be able to do in the recovery phase? So if you use your flip chart paper or note paper, you split your paper into 3 categories. So you'll have preparation, execution, recovery, and then you're going to have to do it for these 4 tasks. It should take quite a while, this. It's not simple, and all I want to try and get you to appreciate is how complex some of these activities are. And they're basic movement skills that we expect and we assume a young child is competent in and that they just acquire naturally.